6 Leslie.
Here to set you free. How you doing? Just got back from 2 weeks vacation, not together. A week vacation, a week of work, a week vacation. And went to the big island of Hawaii. It's beautiful. Never been there before. I love it. I think it's my favorite of the Hawaiian Islands that I visited. Very nice time. Got to see my baby brother who just got married. He flew over from Honolulu, spent some time with me, hubby, and the kids. And this past week, had my niece and nephew visiting from Boston, and we did a staycation, which meant things like Universal and the beach and all that fun stuff that we have here in Los Angeles. But now it's time to get busy and get back to work. We got some primaries going on today in states like Florida and New York. First and foremost, I just want to say you can't sit home and not vote. I honestly don't care if you're a Democrat or Republican, but especially if you're a Democrat, you got to vote. But listen, regardless of your political ideology or any party that you align yourself with, voting is essential. It is an obligation. It is a privilege. It is a right. It is part of what keeps us free as a society. And you really can't be a part of the process and then, biatch, gripe, moan, and complain about the process. You know what I mean? So get out there and vote today in those states where they're having those primary races. It'll make you feel good because being part of the process, makes you part of the fabric, right, of what makes this nation great and continues those freedoms going forward for generations after we're gone. Anyway, I'm Leslie Marshall. Welcome or welcome back. Only true democracy and talk here. And thank you for listening to us on radio, on stream, on podcast, watching us on Twitter's Periscope, Facebook Live, LinkedIn Live, YouTube Live, everywhere you get the show, whether you listen to it live, you listen to it at a different time. On Progressive Voices, you may listen to it there. And speaking of, Jon Sinton for Progressive Voices is going to be joining us later in the hour. He's our guest. But first off, let's kick it off and check what is ripped from those headlines. The White House is expected to announce a plan to cancel a chunk of student loan debt. This will be tomorrow. In addition to an extension of the existing payment pause, there are those on the Hill with knowledge of this. Various sources are saying that's what's coming. Now, these sources also say the president's intended measure will include at least $10,000 in loan forgiveness for borrowers who make less than $125,000 a year, which is most kids coming out of school, right? As well as another payment freeze for roughly 4 months. So the figure, $10,000, would be the largest forgiveness of federal student loans per individual to date in history. The move comes just a week ahead of the White House's self-imposed August 31st deadline at the end of this month, just around the corner. The timing has left millions of Americans waiting for guidance from the Department of Education on whether student loan payments that have been deferred since the start of the pandemic would resume next month. Now, the potential announcement tomorrow comes with the smallest window of time borrowers have had to determine when their payments would resume. The White House, under both this president and former President Trump, have extended the pause 6 times, and that's since March 2020, sometimes giving borrowers up to a month notice on whether their bills would be due. And of course, COVID and the pandemic, played into those decisions. The former president's order temporarily stopped the accrual of interest on federal student loans, effectively putting $1.6 trillion in debt owed by some 40 million Americans on hold. So this isn't a Democrat thing. A Republican president has done it as well. This is just a measure to assist those who are having a hard time finding good paying jobs, especially when we've been in a pandemic and we're not out of the woods financially as of yet. Now, since President Biden has taken office, his administration has greenlighted over $31 billion in student loan relief for hundreds of thousands of borrowers. That relief is only extended to certain cases. That includes those who have attended schools found to have misled students, like the former president's universities, borrowers with disabilities, and those participating in the public service loan forgiveness program. Now, the $10,000 forgiveness is for a much wider breadth of borrowers. So it's still gonna, some people are gonna poo-poo it. There are gonna be some activists or some Democrats that go, not enough, didn't go far enough, not big enough, not enough people covered, not enough cash. And they've pushed the administration to forgive much more in federal student loan debt. In May, Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer, Democrat from New York, Senator Elizabeth Warren, the Democrat from Massachusetts, Senator Raphael Warnock, Democrat from Georgia, met with President Biden to push for this forgiveness. Now, advocates and other Democrats, including Schumer, they pressed for $50,000 per borrower. Per borrower. I have such a hard time with ours being from Massachusetts, right? From those who borrowed, or to cancel the debt entirely. Let's rip another. The Democrats' new climate law could cut related damages by as much as $1.9 trillion through 2050 by reducing impacts from extreme weather events, sea level rise, and other events. That's according to a new White House analysis shared first with AXIOS. Now, why does this matter? Well, the economic ramifications of climate change, they're potentially staggering, eating into the U.S. GDP by the end of the century, reports have warned. And the report states it's OMB's first ever published estimate of avoided climate-related costs due to the effects of particular legislation. So let's zoom in on this, right? The analysis published online this morning by the White House Office of Management and Budget, they use underlying modeling work done by Princeton University, as well as Energy Innovation, a climate think tank, and Rhodium Group, which is a consulting firm. So you got all the three areas: consultants, you got the climate people, the think tank, and then you got the academics at Princeton. All right. The bill these outside modeling groups show, all three show, has the potential to cut U.S. emissions by up to 1 billion metric tons of carbon dioxide annually by 2030, 8 years away, around the corner. That's up to 1 billion metric tons. And by cutting emissions from the world's second largest emitter to the tune of up to 40% below 2005 levels by 2030, this new law could reduce the likelihood of the most damaging climate change outcomes. That's good for our physical health. That's good for the environmental health, and it's good for the fiscal health as well, right? Animals, plant life, the list goes on. Let's rip another. Former Louisville Metro Police Officer Kelly Goodlett today pled guilty in federal court to one count of conspiracy related to the killing of Breonna Taylor, admitting that she helped falsify a search warrant and filed a false report after Taylor's death as part of a cover-up attempt. This report from the New York Times. So, Breonna Taylor, this wasn't just an African-American movement and Black people mad at white cops. This wasn't just those on the left or Black Lives Matter people or, people that want to say Activa. No, the Antifa, excuse me, not Activa. Activa is like yogurt, right? Antifa. Basically, there was a cover-up and there was falsifying a search warrant. The search warrant wasn't even accurate. So driving the news here, it's the first conviction in a case that ignited those protests nationwide over police brutality and racial justice. And if you want to look, let's do a quick catch up here, right? The DOJ said, the Department of Justice said, Louisville police officers broke into her home, Breonna Taylor's home, in a March 2020 raid, and they had a falsified no-knock search warrant for a drug investigation, okay? The Kentucky Attorney General said they knocked and announced their presence, but her boyfriend, Kenneth Walker, and some neighbors said they never heard anything of the sort, okay? Walker said he thought the officers were intruders. So it's not just that they didn't knock, but the warrant was falsified as well. Officers used a police battering ram to break down her door, even though she was not the main suspect. They shot her at least 8 times. After Walker fired his gun, Taylor was alive for at least 20 minutes after officers shot her. She did not receive medical attention, even though she still showed signs of life. And that's according to Walker and to the police dispatch logs. The big picture here is that the 3 other officers who faced federal charges, Sergeant Kylie Meany, former Detective Joshua Janus, and former Detective Brett Hankinson, they have pled not guilty. Hankinson, who shot multiple rounds into the apartment of Ms. Taylor, was acquitted of wanton endangerment back in March, but he was the only officer who faced state charges. Now, the Department of Justice, federal, has charged Hankinson with violating the civil rights of Taylor, Walker, and their neighbors for firing multiple shots through the bedroom. window and a sliding glass door. Janus and Meany are also accused of falsifying that search warrant, the affidavit that led to the raid. And Goodlet's testimony could prove crucial because prosecutors are pursuing cases against the other three. She resigned from the police force after the Department of Justice unveiled these charges back in March. That's what's ripped from the headlines Part A or Part 1. We'll be back with Part 2, Part B right after this quick commercial break. Don't go away. I'm Leslie Marshall.
If you miss Leslie on TV this week, catch up at lesliemarshallshow.com. Follow Leslie on Twitter. Just go to www.twitter.com/Leslie Marshall, and we'll be sure to share your tweets.
I want to get back to seeing my grandbabies every Sunday and smothering them with big hugs and kisses.
I want to get back to football games with my boys.
I want to get back to feeling and touching, connecting with the people around me.
I want to get back to family dinners and my grandma's mac and cheese.
I want to get back to real grocery shopping, taking my time, walking down every aisle, smelling the tomatoes and melons, having a free sample or two, or three.
COVID-19 has changed how we live and how we feel. But now, there are vaccines. And they are the first step that let us get back to feeling optimistic about the days ahead of us. It's okay to have questions.
Is it safe?
Should I get it?
Should I wait?
Now, get the facts. Learn more at getvaccineanswers.org so you can make an informed decision when vaccines are available to you. Brought to you by the Ad Council.
Hey sis, missed you this morning. Kim told me you weren't feeling well, so I'm just doing a self-care check.
Oh, thank you, friend.
How you doing?
Girl, listen, my energy was so low because I didn't eat breakfast when I got up, so I had to miss virtual yoga with y'all.
Trust me, I understand.
But I'm doing much better now that I've eaten, so I'm back on track.
Great. In that case, let's get some steps in tonight. I'll come over and we can walk around the lake.
Sounds good. Appreciate you being in my business, too. Now, let me get in yours. Did you check your blood pressure today?
I did that and my squats, okay?
Okay.
High blood pressure is not going to be my friend if I can help it. See you at 6?
Let's get it. See you then.
Now more than ever, it's important that we protect our hearts and the hearts of those we love. Check in on one another and be a part of a healthy blood pressure movement. Rally your squad to take the online pledge at releasethepressure.org. Brought to you by the Release the Pressure Coalition and the Ad Council.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1900. That was the day that folk singer Malvina Reynolds was born to a Jewish family in San Francisco. Her parents were socialists and operated a tailor shop. Malvina learned the price of speaking out for what you believe in at a young age. Her parents opposed U.S. entry into World War I. Because of this, Malvina's high school would not issue her a diploma. She was able to still go to college at Berkeley, where she eventually earned her Ph.D. She married carpenter and labor organizer William Bud Reynolds. She became a prolific folk singer, playing around the Los Angeles area. During the 1960s, she wrote about songs supporting civil rights and labor rights. Her song, Free Enterprise, offers the lyrics, "The air you breathe is poison. The food you eat is worse. The dollars in your paycheck are pennies in your purse. There's nothing free about it. You pay at every turn, except the guys in Wall Street who have the stuff to burn. They had to make new brain machines to count their profits rise, but since there's always room for more, they can still make their profits soar. A little war does wonders for free enterprise." Perhaps her most well-known song is Little Boxes. The song was inspired by driving by hillside houses in Daly City, California. It talks about the conformity of middle-class suburbia.
Where they are put in boxes and they come out all the same. And the boys go into business and marry and raise a family in boxes made of ticky-tacky, and they all look just the same.
Like what you hear? Check out more at laborhistoryin2.com.
And a blue one and a yellow one, and they're all made out of ticky-tacky, and they all look just the same.
And we're back. I'm Leslie Marshall. Welcome or welcome back. Only True Democracy in Talk. We are talking about what's ripped from the headlines, and this is the second round, or part B, after that break. A judge declined this week to block a Georgia election law that prohibits handing out food and water to voters waiting in line at the polls, according to the Associated Press. The big picture here is that the new rule is part of SB 202. It's an elections overhaul passed by Georgia lawmakers last year. Advocates argue that the reforms disproportionately burden voters of color and Democratic-leaning voters. The Department of Justice, Asian Americans Advancing Justice Atlanta, Black Voters Matter Fund, and Galeo are among the 8 plaintiffs challenging various parts of that election policy overhaul. Now, this is why this really matters, okay? The new rule will remain in place for the November general election, and that features a pair of competitive races. Republican Governor Brian Kemp, he's seeking another term in a rematch against Democratic challenger Stacey Abrams, and the U.S. Senate race, where current Senator U.S. Raphael Warnock, Democrat, he's facing a challenge from Republican Herschel Walker, who thinks we have enough trees. And I understand he was a great football player. I understand he's got name recognition, and that's why voters pick somebody. But may I just say this without being rude? I have never heard somebody speak more ignorantly on the issues. And voters, you Republican voters out there, you can't get a candidate that represents you better than somebody who's got great trophies and played great football and has a, popular celebrity name. I mean, it's really sad when he, tries to poo-poo climate change because he thinks we have a lot of trees. You need people who are making decisions, who are knowledgeable on the issues, because these decisions affect you and they affect your children and your children's children long after we're gone. I just have to say, I'm astounded. I'm not just talking about, oh, yes, I have this many kids versus that many kids, but I'm just looking at the issues, the lack of knowledge on those issues. It's just mind blowing to me. So here are the details in this. The state argued that the new ban would protect against conditions at polls that could lead to worries over potential illegal campaigning or vote buying. Voting rights groups argued the ban infringes on their right to free speech. But, although U.S. District Judge J.P. Booley sided with the state of Georgia, the judge said it's too close to the election to make changes. He said the voting rights groups may ultimately prevail on their part of the challenge. Just it's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when, so to speak. Changing the rules for the primaries from the primaries for the general election could cause confusion, he said. So this is what they're saying. Quote, while Georgia's cruel ban on line relief stands for now, we look forward to presenting our broader case against SB 202 at trial, where we will prove that many provisions in the legislation violate federal law and the Constitution. That was the ACLU of Georgia voting rights attorney Rahul Garabadu. And I have to say, after the next, midterm and general election, they're going to have more evidence and a stronger case. So this could end up, benefiting voters in Georgia in the future. Sadly, it won't come sooner. Let's rip another. Today, a jury found 2 men guilty of conspiring to kidnap Michigan Governor Gretchen Whitmer in 2020. Adam Fox, Barry Croft Jr. were also found guilty of conspiring to obtain a weapon of mass destruction in the form of a bomb, which they planned to use to destroy a bridge as part of this kidnapping plot. This is how cray-cray the cray-crays have gotten. Because this would not just have hurt Governor Whitmer and probably led to her death, but how many other people in the process on that bridge, under that bridge, near that bridge? The jury found Croft guilty of knowingly possessing an unregistered destructive device, specifically an improvised explosive wrapped in pennies for shrapnel, kidnapping conspiracy, and the conspiracy to use a weapon of mass destruction, punishable by up to life in prison. Croft and Fox were among 6 men charged in October 2020 over a plot which the FBI disrupted, for all of you poo-pooing the FBI or wanting to dismantle it, to violently overthrow Michigan's government and kidnap Whitmer. And by the way, we're not a third world country. This government overthrow talk, whether it's January 6th on a national level or whether it's what happened in October 2020 on a state level in Michigan, It is a danger to our democracy, and why the polls show that's the number one concern of voters. Don't downplay it, Mitch McConnell. Don't downplay it. It is very real. Now, this was the second trial related to the plot after a unanimous verdict was not reached for Fox and Croft in a previous trial. Jurors acquitted two of the men, Brandon Caserta and Daniel Harris, in April. The other two men, Ty Garbin and Caleb Franks, pled guilty to conspiracy charges in 2021 and 2022, respectively. So here's what they're saying. Today's verdict confirms this plot was very real and very dangerous. That's the former U.S. Attorney Andrew Burge for the Western District of Michigan. He was appointed to oversee the trial, and he further said, quote, "These men posed a threat not only to the governor personally, but also to bystanders." My point exactly. No elected leader should have to contend with what Governor Whitmer faced here. He said, quote, "She deserves to live in safety, not in fear, just like everyone else in our state or Supreme Court justices. All of our elected leaders deserve that, and the Justice Department will not tolerate violent extremist plots of this nature seeking to undermine our democracy." I'd like to hear more Republicans speak out when a Democrat's life is in danger, not just when some conservative members of a court are. The big picture, the FBI started tracking this conspiracy in early 2020 through social media platforms. If you see something, say something. Does not just apply to airlines and to Muslims. It applies to if you read something online and you're uncomfortable and you think it could be dangerous, words can become actions, and words can become violent words, and rhetoric can become violent actions. Let's rip another. Here's some audio of Republican Congressman Andy Barr trying to change the subject when Chuck Todd asked him what the GOP's plan is to deal with inflation other than poo-pooing Democrats.
What is your plan to deal with inflation? What is the Republican plan to deal with inflation other than not supporting Joe Biden policies? And I say that because what is the proactive agenda here?
Well, we have a positive agenda. We have a commitment to America, and we're going to get back to basics. Republicans are going to win landslide elections, not just because Joe Biden has done such a poor job and congressional Democrats have failed the American people on the economy, crime, and the border, but because we have a positive agenda to secure the border, to get back to basics, to stop the flow of drugs into our communities, to prevent people on the terror watch list from coming across the southern border.
That's what's called a deflect and pivot. Politicians do it all the time. They don't answer the question. By the way, people like me do it from time to time. Let's rip another. A Florida school district rejected a donation of dictionaries after putting a freeze on new books in libraries and classrooms as officials navigate a new state law designed to make it easier to pull books deemed objectionable. It's an issue many districts are likely wrestling with as students return to school in Republican-led states that have implemented restrictions on book content, targeting topics like race, gender, sexuality, and Frank's diary. Details, the Venice Rotary Club partnered with the nonprofit Dictionary Profit to donate over 4,000 dictionaries to elementary schools in the Sarasota County School District for almost 15 consecutive years. And this year, that donation was rejected for the very first time. The dumbing down of America. The dumbing down of America. If a library doesn't contain at least one book that offends someone, it's not a library, in my opinion. I'm Leslie Marshall. That's what's written from the headlines. We're going to take a break. We'll be back with Jon Sinton of Progressive Voices. You'll hear more from him and me right after this.
Hey, Dad, how do airplanes fly? What's in this box? Can I touch this? Where does sand come from? Is this tree good for climbing? What happens if I mix these two things together? How are babies made? What does this thing do?
Kids are curious about everything, including guns. Talking to them about gun safety in your home is a good first step, but you can do more. Always keep your guns locked, unloaded, and stored separately from ammunition. Storing your guns securely is the best way to prevent family fire, including unintentional shootings. For more information on safe gun storage and ways to keep your family safe, visit endfamilyfire.org. That's endfamilyfire.org.
What do we keep in the attic? What's this thing called? Can I ride my bike backwards?
Like I said, kids are curious. It's up to us to keep them safe. Brought to you by End Family Fire, Brady, and the Ad Council.
Right now, our country feels divided, but there's a place where people are coming together.
I gotta tell you, I was nervous to talk to someone so different than me.
Me too, but I'm glad we are.
Love Has No Labels and One Small Step are helping people with different political views, beliefs, and life experiences come together through conversation, and it feels good.
Wow, your story is so...
Interesting?
Yeah.
When people actually sit down, talk, and listen to one another, they can break down boundaries and connect as human beings. At lovehasnolabels.com/onesmallstep, you can listen to amazing, life-changing conversations and find simple tools to start a conversation of your own.
I know one thing. This conversation gives me hope.
It gives me a lot of hope, too.
Take a step toward bringing our country and your community together by having the courage to start a conversation at lovehasnolabels.com/onesmallstep. A message from StoryCorps, Love Has No Labels, and the Ad Council.
Let's all gather round the campfire, buckaroos, and let old Cactus Jim here tell you about some of today's hardy, hard-working cowboys. Yes, those manly men who live free-spirited, yippee-ki-yi-yo cowboy lives out in the rustic ranch country of the Rocky Mountain West. Oh, wait, that was a century ago. The cowboys who are now humming Home on the Range across Montana, Idaho, and Wyoming are multimillionaire and billionaire corporate titans and celebrities like Rupert Murdoch, Bill Gates, and Bruce Willis. They don't really live there nor mix with the locals, nor do they actually ranch their spectacular 300,000-acre spreads since they don't know how. So they hire real ranching outfits to bring in some cattle, sheep, and other ranching accrue malts. Then they fly in on private jets occasionally and strut around.
One of my daughters-in-law is a nurse practitioner at Denver General.
But they surely are land barons.
They just feel like they're constantly at risk, and they've got everybody vaccinated, but
Indeed, these dilettantes rule the availability of ranch land and scenic wilderness, pricing out people who really want to ranch and locking out families who want to experience some of nature's most majestic rivers and mountains. 15 years ago, the biggest private landowners held 27 million acres. Now, they've grabbed 42 million acres for themselves.
It's
well,
so
say
true.
apologists for wealth concentration, they bought the land with their money, so it's fair and square.
Right.
But hold on, Slick. They don't come here
enough
just
already.
for the views,
To have
hunting, and
politicized
exclusivity.
absolutely
Their ranches
everything.
get generous land subsidies. Plus, states like Wyoming provide no-tax hideaways for their wealth. This is Jim Hightower saying, so even though you and I are shut out of these gated land baronies, at least we can take pride in knowing that it's our tax dollars that help the rich buy them and lock the gates. There. Doesn't that make you feel better?
We are back. How you doing? I'm Leslie Marshall. Welcome back, and we're glad to have back Jon Sinton. Jon is Executive Director and CEO of Let Majority Rule. They're a nonpartisan organization dedicated to ensuring that America hears the voice of the majority of voters. Now, in early 2011, Jon co-founded the smartphone app Progressive Voices, which we're very proud to be a part of, and he aggregates all progressive content that is seen, that is heard, that is read. In 2012, Progressive Voices launched a streaming radio service, the Progressive Voices channel on TuneIn that we're a part of. And the websites for Let Majority Rule and Progressive Voices are letmajorityrule.org, check it out, and progressivevoices.com, check it out. On Twitter, you can follow them there at Let Majority Rule and at Prog Voice, P-R-O-G Voice. Jon's handle is at Jon Sinton, Jon-Sinton. And finally, check out Jon's Reluctant blog by visiting jonbsinton.substack.com. That's jonbsinton.substack.com. Jon, more than a pleasure to have you back with us today. I want to talk about your latest edition. You and I were just talking off the air about Enough Already. And that is actually what you wrote about, Enough Already. Even though we were talking about COVID, this could go to climate change and people like Herschel Walker that think because we have enough trees, hey, climate's good and we're good. This is in the aftermath of the legally obtained with a search warrant approved by a judge that was appointed by former President Trump, records that should never have left the White House and be sitting that are top security documents that involve the positioning of our military and things like that. We're finding out, sitting in a beach house in Florida where people are freely coming and going. So let's talk about this. I love this piece that you wrote, and that's why I want to just say again, folks, please He's a great writer. He writes like he speaks, and he's a great speaker, and not everybody can do that. And I know that personally. JohnBSinton.substack.com. Let's talk about this. John, when you say enough already, and I agree with you 100%, it could go to so many things. But let's talk about this raid and how this has pushed Trump into a higher standing, again, and ahead of the Republicans. He's a problem for the Republicans. You would think more Republicans would speak out and would defend the very departments that they think we Democrats want to dismantle.
Leslie, first off, thanks so much for having me back and all your kind words. I'm sorry to burden you with all of my handles, websites, and extraneous noise. So what do you do when an eye roll is not enough? This guy's malignant narcissism has extended into every aspect of our public life, even to the extent that the New York Times and the Washington Post and you and me sometimes call this a raid. And I write about this, to me, a raid is when a couple of H-60 helicopters swoop down into Pakistan and kill Osama bin Laden. That's a raid. The untouchables roll up to an Al Capone warehouse with axes and Thompson submachine guns, and they let loose, and that's a raid. This is not a raid. This is a legally, as you said, this is a legally executed search warrant that comes on the heels of the Justice Department, the National Archives, asking politely beginning in January if the Trump people might know the whereabouts of some missing documents. And, oh yes, we're very cooperative. Well, the former president happens to have them under the bar at Mar-a-lago. So the archive people freak out and they head down to Mar-a-Lago, and okay, not quite as bad as being in the bar, but they're essentially in a poorly secured storeroom. And they say, okay, two things. First, put better locks on the damn door. And second, they say, you still have some stuff and we want it back, and here's a list.
So, John, I want to interrupt you because what you're
sure.
saying is 100% accurate. And I want people to hear this. What you are basically saying, and what people need to know, regardless of their ideology, is this raid, which is not a raid, this search warrant that was served would not have come about. It was preventable because they just didn't do what was asked, which is give this stuff back and the other stuff, store it better, more securely, better locking system, better placement.
That's exactly right, Leslie. And to follow the timeline, so first they ask politely, and then all of a sudden the communication slows down and stops. And so I think rather reluctantly, because who would want to do that, they issue a subpoena. So now they've got the force of law and this is back in March, I think. And now they have the force of law that is saying, hey, you need to follow the law because, after all, no man is above the law. And because we are a country that's based on the rule of law, you need to hand those documents over, at which point he actually says, those are my documents, which shouldn't surprise anybody. And he refuses to hand them over. It escalates, they argue, and ultimately it results in a federal judge issuing a search warrant. And that's where we are today. Oh, I guess yesterday in right out of chapter 1 of the Trump playbook, he sues the government because, man, this guy likes to sue people. And he makes all these absolutely outrageous claims about who owns these documents. Oh, ex-presidents, they always have access to those documents. Well, yeah, they go to a national archive site that's approved, and they use the documents to write their memoirs. And he's tried his typical range of stupid excuses. But the thing is, and this drives me nuts, he uses these excuses to fundraise. And there was a point last week where he was raising $1 million a day from these, sad but true, from these underinformed, probably Fox News and conservative talk radio audience who just can't wait to throw more money at him.
You're reading my mind because I wanted to go into the allegations of the political nature of this. Of course, people are saying Merrick Garland, the Department of Justice, is Joe Biden's DOJ, because we have seen, Department of Justices pretty much be the president's DOJ, like in the last administration.
Right.
But when we look at this, I say it's not political because sadly, it's helping Donald Trump politically, to your point, with the fundraising. And then when you see some polls that have come out in the past couple of days showing that he has gone ahead popularity wise, more people are liking Trump again than the GOP. That's a problem for the GOP because then more of, sadly, these Trump-backed candidates can get in, and they're extreme. And Democrats have seen this happen too, but Republicans more so. Republicans have seen 2012 would be an example that when you put extreme candidates out there, it can backfire. And this tsunami you're expecting for Democrats may not be as certain in the midterms or in the next election, the general election.
That's absolutely true. And, if you're going to give him and his sort of executive staff credit for anything, it should be that they are world-class Olympic gold medalists in grifting. I mean, they are such grifters. It's unbelievable to me what they can fundraise off of. I'm looking in my old home state of Georgia, and I'm watching the barely comprehensible Herschel Walker. And hey, I lived there in 1980 when the Georgia Bulldogs won the national championship on his back. And, that was wonderful. But it's a real problem, Leslie, in the South, from which I herald. College football is almost as big as the Southern Baptist Conference. I mean, it is a religion. The Southeastern Conference has a tendency to overwhelm the thought processes of otherwise intelligent Southerners. And that's how you wind up with a senator from Alabama who is the former football coach of Auburn, which is really the only credential that you need to get elected to the Senate there. And it turns out that Tommy Tuberville doesn't know, after he's elected, by the way, to the Senate, he can't identify the three branches of government. So it shouldn't surprise anyone that Herschel Walker, who has never lived in the state of Georgia as an adult, after college, he moved to Dallas, Texas. He's never lived in Georgia since. And all of a sudden,
like Dr. Oz, who doesn't live in Pennsylvania.
Exactly. And they can't laud him enough. And they're so thrilled that Herschel's running for office. And you listen to this guy talk, and it's a word salad. And you wonder how he can even think he can compete with it.
Well, I was saying in Rip from the Headlines before, we have to take a break. We'll talk about this more. How can anybody elect somebody who doesn't understand the issues to make law about the very issues that affect you, your children, your livelihood, the air you breathe? The list goes on. We'll be back. And no, we don't have enough trees. I'm Leslie Marshall. We'll be back with Jon Sinton right after this. Do not go away. Go to johnbsinton.substack.com to check out Jon's reluctant blog. The latest edition, enough already, is what we're talking about today. Don't go.
What I know about courage, I learned from my adoptive mom. She said sometimes you just gotta hold on and know we'll get through this. Mom, we are so high up. Hold my hand.
No, you hold my hand.
Here we go.
Learn about adopting a teen from foster care. You can't imagine the reward. Visit adoptuskids.org to find out more.
I learned patience from my adoptive dad. All he had to say was,
"Hey, you got this. Just breathe." Hey, we're pretty good.
Yeah.
Might have to start a band.
I got it.
Learn about adopting a teen from foster care. You can't imagine the reward. Visit adoptuskids.org to find out more. This message is brought to you by Adopt US Kids, the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, and the Ad Council.
COVID-19 has changed how we live and how we feel. We show up differently, worship differently, and have found new ways to express our love and support to family and friends. But now there are vaccines. And they are the first step that lets us get back into the things we miss most. Like spreading the word without spreading concern. Girls tripping instead of solo sipping. Brunching instead of late night munching. And talking smack with a side of mac and cheese. It's okay to have questions about COVID-19 vaccines.
Should I get it?
Should I wait?
Is it safe?
Can I trust it?
What about pre-existing conditions?
Now get the facts. Visit getvaccineanswers.org so you can make an informed decision when COVID-19 vaccines are available to you. Brought to you by the Ad Council.
(911), what's your emergency?
America's healthcare system is broken and people are dying.
Welcome to Code WAC, where we shine a light on America's callous healthcare system, how it hurts us, and what we can do about it. I'm your host, Brenda Gazar. This time on Code WAC, the Supreme Court recently ended the constitutional right to an abortion by overturning Roe v. Wade. But why is inequality in reproductive health care nothing new? What can be done to address these long-standing inequalities? To find out, we spoke to Kat Duffy, a policy analyst in the National Health Law Program's Washington, D.C. office.
Abortion has been systematically stigmatized and turned into a political issue as opposed to the basic healthcare service that it is by the anti-abortion movement. Prior to Roe versus Wade, abortion was just treated as what it is, which is healthcare. It wasn't until Roe galvanized the religious right that abortion became this deeply stigmatized taboo issue. Here at NHELP, we believe that abortion is healthcare and that every person deserves the right to determine when or if to become a parent and how to raise that child, and if they choose to have a child, to raise it in a safe and healthy environment. The government should be involved insofar as they have an obligation to ensure that everyone has access to healthcare. The government should not be in the business of denying people healthcare, and we've seen at the state level in particular, ideological legislators stripping away certain services because they've decided personally that it's wrong.
The full Code WAC story on progressivevoices.com and on the PV app. Catch all our episodes by subscribing to Code WAC wherever you find your podcast. Podcast is powered by Heal California, a nonprofit that uplifts the voices of those fighting for healthcare reform around the country. Until next time, stay healthy.
We are back. We're back with Jon talking about his reluctant blog, latest edition, Enough Already. You can find that, by the way, Jon's reluctant blog at jonbsinton.substack.com. Also, check out Let Majority Rule, a nonpartisan organization dedicated to ensuring that America hears the voice of the majority of voters at Let Majority Rule, and Progressive Voices, where you can hear shows like mine, a streaming radio service, the Progressive Voices channel on TuneIn that provides progressive voices like mine and others and that content. Go to progressivevoices.com and follow them on Twitter, Jon at Jon Sinton, JONSINTON, at Let Majority Rule, and at Prog Voice, PROG Voice. Jon, thank you for holding. Welcome back. So let's talk about the politicizing of this. We touched upon that. But obviously the Department of Justice is not politically trying to help Joe Biden and Democrats, because if anything, like you said, Donald Trump's fundraising off it, and polls are showing, it's kind of sadly reincarnated his popularity within the GOP.
It's so true, Leslie, and I feel badly for Joe Biden because he managed to pass his IRA, the Inflation Reduction Act, on Saturday, I think, and then by Monday, when he wanted to take the victory lap and he had all this travel planned, which he's gone ahead and done, and he fell out of the headlines because Donald Trump sucks all the oxygen out of the room, and a legal search warrant is served, and my house has been raided and they broke into my safe, and they did none of the above. I'm gonna release the videos, and we're going to show the world all the FBI agents that were telling our fans to kill. Well, the only thing it killed was Joe Biden's momentum, the concept, the idea that he would have wanted it to go this way is absurd. The guy deserved, to me, after 2 years of trying to get this legislation passed, he deserved a victory lap. And the American people, a phrase that I hate to use because whenever I hear Mitch McConnell use it, I think to myself, oh my God, you mean rich white men over 65. Anyway, the fact that Donald Trump's legally served search warrant usurps every bit of momentum that Joe Biden might have had, it doesn't just rob Joe Biden, Leslie, it robs us, the citizens of this country, who don't stay as closely informed as perhaps you and I do and your audience. Kudos to all of you folks, by the way. But the vast majority of Americans have no idea what's in that legislation. And the only thing they know is that Donald Trump's compound was raided. Now, the good news is that 58% of Americans, according to an NBC poll yesterday, believe that the Justice Department and the Select Investigative Committee of the U.S. Congress should continue looking into this matter and the January 6th matter, no matter what.
Oh, I agree 100%. In your blog, you talk about your grandmother. Can you tell that story? And the reason I want you to tell that story is I was going to ask you, because of that portion of your blog, and maybe because I'm half Jewish, I don't know, but why people are giving a grifter who they perceive as being uber rich money at all. But I think your grandmother's story speaks to that.
Well, I appreciate the opportunity to tell the story. So my grandmother was one of the only members of her family to escape Europe and the Holocaust. And she came to the United States at about 15 years of age, did not speak English. Over time, she spoke English, Russian, Polish, German, and Yiddish/Hebrew.
Where did she come from? Which country, John?
She came from Poland. And I said to her, Ma, why do you speak so many languages? And she said, well, you never knew who was going to be at the door. Meaning, was it going to be the Russians or the Germans or the Polish army? You never knew. Anyway, so she gets to the United States, and so learns to speak English, but is never a terribly sophisticated person, having been born, in a country with no indoor plumbing. You think about the range of her life all the way through putting a man on the moon. But to your point, she used to sit at night and watch the televangelists on television. And she would write checks and give them money. And I would say to her, Ma, why in the world are you writing checks to these men? And to Tammy Faye Baker, so men and women. And she'd say, because they have faith, because their faith is so obvious. And I'd say, but Ma, you're Jewish. And she'd say, matters not, doesn't make any difference to me. I see their hearts, I see their faith, and I want to contribute, and I want to help. There was no talking her out of supporting those grifters, and I found that to be really informative when it comes to Donald Trump and his tribe. And trust me, it is tribal. And when he says, I need money to fight this battle, it's a witch hunt, they don't see a grifter. They see an average, ordinary billionaire begging for money, and they can't wait to write a check.
But it becomes very dangerous too, right? Because with televangelists, you're writing check to help their lavish lifestyle. And whether you're Christian, Jewish, whatever you think that you're buying, people think they're buying their way to heaven, right? Send me $20, or if I send them money, I'll get money. I mean, it's crazy. But what's crazier is it can become dangerous. We've seen what happened with Governor Whitmer in Michigan. We saw what happened on January 6th. We see people who are being put in power. God forbid Herschel Walker, but Marjorie Taylor Greene. I think Marjorie Taylor Greene's a dangerous woman. I think that her words are very dangerous. She's demanding we defund the FBI. These are people that are writing checks to people like Marjorie Taylor Greene that are going rah-rah to somebody who with a bomb wants to kidnap the governor of a state and overthrow the government of not only the state of Michigan, but on January 6th, the government of the United States.
Right.
So speak to that. How dangerous is this? I mean, I don't think we will be defunding the FBI, but how dangerous is it?
Of course not. And I think that if you flip the script a little bit, you will see that Marjorie Taylor Greene and her cohorts, whether it's Matt Gaetz in Florida or Representative Boebert out in Colorado, these aren't really legislators, Leslie. These are performance artists.
Yeah.
They've decided that their stage will be the United States Capitol, and they've decided that their rhetoric is appropriate to them for fundraising. It's hard for me to estimate whether or not they believe the things that they say. I have to doubt it because some of it is so nonsensical. But by the same token, they rally the uninformed and the underinformed. They give them bumper sticker slogans. And before you know it, you have the same people who were decrying ultra left people saying defund the police, and now they're saying defund the police with a straight face and fundraising on top of it. That should tell you that these are very dangerous people.
You wrote, so a slippery guy, I love this paragraph. So a slippery guy blows up every norm of public life and trust, complaining all the while about his victimhood, constantly airing his grievances and driving through every guardrail our institutions and decency have had in place for centuries. And it's shocking when the Teflon wears off and he's held to account. Did Donald Trump create this, or did he just water a garden that was already seeded with this division, this hate, and this lunacy?
Well, you know, he just watered an existing garden. But the interesting thing is, he had no idea because he's incurious. You know, he's not a student of history. He really knows nothing. But if you know something, you know that this division between rural and urban, educated and uneducated, goes back to the founding of our country. Every few decades, it rears its ugly head. And, you know, we've seen this most recently with the John Birch Society in the 1960s. These are all the same people and these are all the same arguments. Donald Trump happened to tap into this vein, probably with the help of guys like the Steves, you know, Stephen Miller and the guy with the who needs to wash his hair, Steve Bannon. So yes, it's a garden that we have to weed constantly, and generally we've been safe from it, but we've never had an imbalance and a fragmentation in the media the way we have it today. And that's why when he watered it, all of a sudden it was like you put Miracle-Gro on it.
Absolutely. We have like 30 seconds. I don't have time to. I could talk to you all day. So interesting, John, really. Wish you weren't 2 hours from me down there in San Diego. Jon Sinton, Coronado, right? Jon Sinton, Executive Director and CEO of Let Majority Rule. Also, he launched the streaming radio service, the Progressive Voices channel on TuneIn. Please follow him on Twitter at Jon Sinton, JonSinton, and Let Majority Rule at Let Majority Rule. Progressive Voices at Prog Voice, PROGVOICE. And check out John's reluctant blog. We were just talking about it. You heard how great he is at speaking. Check out his writing, his blogging, johnbsinton.substack.com. That's JONBSINTON.SUBSTACK.com. I'm Leslie Marshall. We'll be back with you soon. Thank you for listening. Thank you for watching. And don't forget to vote today.